Hello, this is Steph, and I'm going to take you through a very low-tech, filmed with my iTouch video of how I created a concept map and why I created a concept map after reading Meno. So, there, Meno. I created this in about 45 minutes on a big easel pad because standing up and writing makes me feel smarter somehow. This may or may not be true for you, but this is going to work for me, and then I can transfer this onto a Poplet later or take a picture. So here we go. The first thing I did was I looked at my notes that I'd written in the margins when I read Meno. Okay, it took me a while to read because I got confused, and so I took a lot of notes in the margins, and I also just tried to take notes saying, okay, this is the main point of this paragraph, or this is the main point of this section. And it helped me tremendously when I went back to make my concept map to have those notes. So here's the main question. Meno asks Socrates, is virtue taught, acquired by practice, or is it inherent? And so they start to go through. So the first thing, Socrates says, well, we need to define virtue. That turns out to be a lot more difficult than Meno thought. And so we have this whole section, and I just made a rectangle of it for myself to remember to come back and look at it more carefully, but Meno has these attempts to define virtue. He says, is it the ability to rule? And Socrates says, no. And furthermore, let's think about what a definition is. And they do that. And then Meno says, okay, virtue is a desire for good things and the ability to attain them. And Socrates says, no. And then he thinks, well, okay, ability to attain good things? No. So in frustration, Meno says, well, how do you even know how to ask questions about something you don't know anything about? And Socrates says, well, knowledge is recollection. I believe that, they agree, he gets Meno to agree with him, both of our souls, because our souls are immortal, we've lived before, so you just have to get interested in something enough to be able to learn/remember it. Knowledge is recollection. And proof, he takes a slave boy through the Pythagorean theorem and then says, well, okay, he's now interested enough, he'll go find out. Okay, they're still trying to figure out how to define virtue. And Socrates says, well, we need to formulate a hypothesis. If virtue is knowledge, then it can be taught. So they ask the question, is virtue knowledge? And they agree, yes, it's wisdom. So then they go on to the next question, is virtue taught? And Socrates says, oops, I don't think virtue is knowledge anymore. So they go back to this question. And they say, well, if it's something that can be taught, there need to be teachers, right? And they bring in this long interview with Antaeus, which I know I want to come back to later, so I just say how long interview with Antaeus. Agree that virtue is not taught, it cannot be taught, there aren't teachers for it, etc. Therefore, we go back to this agreement that Socrates posits that we agree that humans are divine. And Meno says yes. And I know I want to come back to this, because when I got to this point, there were some really interesting things about Socrates' argument that humans are divine that I want to come back to that I didn't even notice the first time I read it. So I just make this mark here for me. And this comes to their conclusion. Oops. Virtue, when it is present, and it isn't always, because humans are not by nature virtuous, it is divinely endowed. We think. We won't be sure until we know for certain what virtue really is. And we don't. Okay, so why did I take you through all this? This was just the thought process that I went through. I mapped out my own thought process as I tried to reconsider Meno. So this will be my second reading of it as I go back and look for particular things. Now that I've got my concept map drawn, I can go into any one of these segments here, any one of my boxes, and I can break it down further. And I think that will help me understand even better what Socrates is trying to do, what Plato is trying to have Socrates do. And it allows me to come up with some really good questions, which I think will be interesting to talk about. Okay? Thank you for enduring my low-tech video.